Just because the Montreal Canadiens aren't playing until the weekend doesn't mean we can't talk about them. We know you're just as impatient as we are to see them back on the ice. Welcome to another edition of Hockey Inside Out. My name is Julian McKenzie, and with me this week are the usual suspects, of course. Montreal Gazette columnist Stu Cowan, Jessica Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal, and former Montreal Canadiens defenseman and NHL assistant coach Rick Green. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get right to these questions. Could you have imagined if the Montreal Canadiens lost to the Toronto Maple Leafs over the weekend? I'm pretty sure there'd be some more negative-like questions in this week's episode, and maybe more vitriol and maybe more hate, but they didn't. They actually beat the Toronto Maple Leafs by a score of 2-1. But let's focus on that score for a second. 2-1, only 2 goals. Not a lot of goal scoring for the Montreal Canadiens as of late. After filling the net to start the year, the Habs have only 8 goals in their last 5 games, as opponents have been clogging the neutral zone to slow them down. So, Rick, I'll start off with you because I think you're the only person out of everyone here who has experience behind an NHL bench. How can the Montreal Canadiens effectively counter this tactic and start to generate offense again?
Well, first off, Julian, there's a lot of teams playing that clog up neutral zone system because it is effective. Canadiens were doing it very well when they were on a little bit of a roll. There's not a lot of space when they have 5 guys basically lined up and, waiting to force turnovers, waiting to, create broken plays, and also trying to force the opposition for dump-ins. To counter that, I think that the Canadiens have done it before. They bring back, say, 2 forwards to generate some speed with close support. And, you can stretch a forward high, but I think the bottom line is you have to come up the ice with some speed with good puck support. So you can do that by coming in a little bit deeper. They have good speed. They can use their speed coming through the neutral zone. And what they don't want to do is force pucks to the middle and, create some high-risk plays. And getting the puck deep, getting their forecheck going, I think we've seen in the past that the Canadiens are very effective at that. So with the talent that they have on their group, I think that coming through the neutral zone with speed, with good puck support, will allow them to make little chip plays and move that puck forward and play into their strength, which is an aggressive forecheck.
Whatever tweaks Claude Julien might make to his system during this week off, at the end of the day, they got to get somebody who can score besides the Foley, Anderson, and Gallagher. They're getting no offense from so many of their forwards, and that's what's really hurting them. 44 goals in the first 10 games and 8 in the last 5. I guess other teams have found that a way to shut down their transition game through the neutral zone, and the Canadiens haven't been able to figure out a way to work around what the other teams have been doing. So Claude Julien has this week to do it. I think the heat is on him a little bit as far as getting this team back on track, because the last 5 games they've looked an awful lot like the team last year that wasn't very good and really struggled scoring goals. So a week off. Claude said the other day that he would have preferred to play another game in a day or 2 days after that third period they had in Toronto, and they played really well. But the little break here will probably do them good, because after this the schedule gets pretty crazy. 5 games in the next 8 days.
Well, I think that's just it. Having this amount of practice time, they can use a lot of time to go over video, especially this year where you're really only playing 6 other teams. It's kind of easy to get prepared for these teams because you're not preparing for the same amount of teams that you were pre-COVID. But that was a major thing, was the practice time, not having enough of it. And hopefully that could work out here. It is a little bit too bad because when you have the win like they did in Toronto, then you want to get back at it right away and keep that momentum going, which is something that's going to be a little bit difficult after this kind of break. And, then having that complex schedule that they have, that if things don't go their way fast, that things can get a little bit difficult for them.
Yeah, and the other thing they need to work on is their power play, which has been horrible again. And Canadiens fans are getting used to that year after year after year. The power play just doesn't get the job done. They're ranked 17th in the NHL again this year. It's an ongoing issue.
I'm just more amazed at the fact that it took, and I get the fact that the team is in the North Division and teams are going to play each other as often as they are. I'm still a bit amazed at how fast it took certain teams in the North Division to kind of figure them out. And it still boggles my mind that of all teams, it's the Ottawa Senators. We talked about it on last week's episode with how they shut them down over those 2 games they played them. I'm just kind of curious about your impressions about how the Canadiens, with the start that they had, now find themselves in a position where they can't score, but also just the fact that a team like even the Ottawa Senators, a team that was supposed to be in the basement, kind of figured them out and have kept them to 2 goals or fewer over these last 5 games.
And you're right, Julian, when you mention Ottawa and you look at the games that they played, and they were very, very, disciplined in their neutral zone. They very seldom would get a lot of guys out of position, and they created a lot of problems for the Canadiens because there are a lot of bodies in the neutral zone, and the Canadiens love that freewheeling type of game, and Ottawa was just sitting back waiting for them to come to them, and then they attacked them before the red line and forced them to make errors. And that's a great system. If it's executed well, it's very effective, and not always the most entertaining, but it's effective in shutting down a high-powered opposition.
And Ottawa, you're right. I mean, they're the worst team in the league. But look what they did to Toronto the other night. The NHL, the parity in this league. The worst team can beat the best team on any night. We see it every year in the playoffs. When how many number 1 seeds lose in the first round of the playoffs every year? It happens year after year after year. So if you're not ready to play and come out against any team, you're going to be in trouble. And no lead safe, as the Leafs showed the other night. But yeah, kudos to the Ottawa coaching staff though for getting there. It's a young team. Obviously, the guys are buying into what the coaching staff is selling. And you're right, they were the first team to sort of figure out a way to shut down the Canadiens, and other teams have followed after that.
And maybe, too, with Ottawa, they really had nothing to lose at that point. And I'm sure the Canadiens won't say that they went in overconfident, but they were feeling really good about themselves. And then all of a sudden it was, wait a second here. I can't do what I was doing in the previous games, and maybe start doubting themselves. And I think that's kind of an effect that it's had on the team so far.
To the few Toronto Maple Leafs fans who watch our show, I guess hate watch in this case, and were probably triggered by Stu Cowan mentioning the 5-1 comeback win leading to 6-5 for the Ottawa Senators. Sorry, not sorry. Let's move on to question number 2. I looked at that 2-1 score. We kind of looked at it from a glass half empty, where we were talking about the fact the team couldn't really score. Let's look at it from a more glass half full kind of stance, where this team actually put on a pretty decent defensive game, and Marc Bergevin has said his team can adjust to any opponent's style. A 2-1 win over Toronto against a team with that high firepowered offense. Wow, say that 3 times fast. A high-powered or fire-powered. Well, look, whatever. They can score goals. I'll bring this question to you all here. Will head coach Claude Julien be tempted to go back to that more defensive style of play?
I think whatever gets the job done. If he's getting wins, Claude Julien doesn't really matter for him what system that he's necessarily using, as long as he's getting the wins. Because I think a lot of people, when they're watching the games, would prefer to see how the Canadiens started the season with a lot of goals. But if it's a little bit more of this defensive-minded game, not as exciting. But at the end of the day, Claude Julien is going to be keeping his job because he's going to be winning games. So I think it's really just playing with what's working for this team and then making some adjustments as it goes. And if this is the case, then I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see it.
Yeah, while the Canadiens only give up 1 goal against the Leafs, their defense was not very good earlier in the game. I mean, that game could have been 4-0 without Carey Price in the first period. They gave up some high-quality scoring chances. So from the glass half-full perspective, Julian, as you were mentioning, Carey Price fills up a lot of that glass because he really looked good. He looked like the Carey Price from the postseason last year in that game against Toronto. And that's the reason they won that game. I mean, they would have been out of it long before the third period if it hadn't been for Carey Price.
And they had a good opportunity this week with the time that they had off to look at some video stuff and highlight parts of their game that they did well and parts of the game that they didn't do well. And I think from my experience, going into each and every game, you do not do major changes to your defensive game. You just kind of fine-tune a couple areas that are causing problems. But I think it's fairly consistent as far as how they have to play neutral zone, defensive zone, and what they want to do in the forecheck. And it's all about execution, and right now they're missing a little bit of that, and the result is not always favorable for them.
Yeah, the other good thing with the week off is that I was at practice Tuesday in Brossard, and Carey Price wasn't on the main rink with his teammates. He was on the second rink in Brossard all alone with goalie coach Stefan Waite for almost an hour just working on goalie drills. That's the nice advantage of having Charlie Lindgren there as a taxi squad goalie. He was on the main rink with Jake Allen. And then Wednesday, the plan was to have Jake Allen work one-on-one with Stefan Waite. So that's the one advantage they can use this week. And I think for Carey Price, his confidence obviously was boosted. Not that he ever has a low confidence, but I think he was maybe feeling a little down. To be able to work with a goalie coach for an hour like that and then get back into practice the rest of this week and get ready. I think he'll be back in net again against the Leafs Saturday night.
Well, since you mentioned Carey Price, I'll just ask the question out to make sure Jess and Rick also get to it as well. How big of a deal was that win for Carey Price over the weekend?
I think it was huge because, Carey Price is a guy who is calm and you never really see him freak out, in the media. We hear him, Stu, after a loss in the locker room, shouting a 4-letter word and being very upset about that. But he's not a guy that shows that anymore emotions, and he'll never say if he's feeling down on himself. But I think just, to get people off his back, to show that he still can play the way he can and that he's capable of, and probably for his own confidence as well, going into this 6-day stretch where they don't have a game, to say, you know what, look, I was able to get the job done. Hopefully the struggles I had in the past are now behind me and I can move on from it.
And he's the first guy to know that he hasn't been performing. And going into that game in Toronto, he felt the pressure. And, looking back, it's a good thing that he responded the way he did, because he made some huge timely saves that allowed the Canadiens to get through those first two periods without being behind 3 or 4 or 5 goals. So, again, in his true character, he always seems to find a way to rally when he needs to. And, hopefully he's going to use this week with the extra workload on seeing lots of pucks to fine-tune some of the technical part of his game, which is obviously going to be a huge benefit moving forward.
Yeah, and the win over Toronto's silence, people would have been talking about that loss all week, right? It would not have been a fun week for the Canadiens. And if Carey Price hadn't played well, it wouldn't have been a fun week for him either, because the goalie controversy talk would have really heated up. So he silenced that for this week with his performance, and the Canadiens sort of silenced the upset fans for the week also with coming back and getting that win.
Man, and I'll say this, even if Carey Price would have lost that game on Saturday, it's still premature to talk goalie controversy. But that's just me. That's just my take. I'll move on to the next question here. We are at the quarter mark of the season, which is kind of strange to say in February, but these are the times that we're in. Panelists, I will ask you this question. What would you say is the Montreal Canadiens' biggest weakness through one quarter of the season played?
I think you have to look at the scoring down the line here. You got to get more consistent scoring out of more guys, and you can't always ask on Anderson Toffoli. You've got to get Drouin chipping in. You got to get Kotkaniemi chipping in. You got to get more from some of their guys. To allow them a chance to win down the stretch here. And if they can't get some offense from some of those guys, it's going to create problems, because it's tough to score in this league, and consistently do it is a big challenge. So everybody on that whole roster that's supposed to be creative and find ways to do some good things offensively, they have to bring it out starting Saturday.
Yeah, to me, their biggest problem is the center position. They've got 6 goals out of their 4 centers all season. Suzuki has 1 goal in his last 9 games. Evans has no points in his last 10. Kotkaniemi has no goals in his last 11. They're struggling in the face-off circle. The younger guys too. That could become. It's a problem now, and it'll become a bigger problem moving forward if these guys can't. The centermen can't pick up their games. Philip Deneau hasn't scored a goal all year. As I mentioned, Suzuki's in a slump, and you're wondering. Last year he hit a bit of a wall also. The Canadiens are banking a lot on their 2 young centermen this season, Suzuki and Kotkaniemi. And Suzuki had points in the first 7 games, 8 of the first 10, and then he sort of hit a bit of a wall. And it's still early in the season. They got to be better down the middle. And they took a risk going into the season with the 3 young centermen. They started off well, but if they don't play better, it's going to be tough.
I think it's consistency. You know, like who are these this Montreal Canadiens team of 2021? Are they a high-scoring team? Are they a defensive team? They also have inconsistency when it comes to the goaltender position. I know, Julian, you said it's too early to have a goaltender controversy.
It's too early.
The drinking game. I should have brought my shot glass.
I'll get my mug anyway.
But I think there's just a lot of question marks around this team. And that's something that they definitely need to address going forward.
So I couldn't help but notice that Stu read out all of the different stat lines from a few players, and it just so happens that the next question has to deal with one Nick Suzuki. He was lighting up the lamp at the beginning of the year. He was getting all those comparisons to Patrice Bergeron, and after the last 5 games, kind of thinking, you know, hey, where's Nick Suzuki? 1 assist in his last 5 games. Panelists, is there reason for concern for Nick Suzuki?
There is, but you got to remember, these guys are young. You know, Alexis Lafreniere, #1 draft pick overall last year. Remember all the hype about him? Canadiens fans wanted the Habs to tank so they'd get him. He's got 1 goal in his first 14 games in the NHL. It's tough for a young guy in the NHL. You know, Suzuki had a great rookie season last year. He hit a wall halfway through. You know, they're counting on it. They're playing him 18 minutes a game, more than any other forward on the team for the Canadiens. He's their #1 center now. There's a lot of pressure on this kid, and you got to remember, he's still young. He's only in his 2nd season, 21 years old. There's going to be growing pains, and we're seeing some right now with all 3 of the young centers, and it's going to continue through the season. And if they're really long and tough growing pains, it's going to be hard for this Canadiens team to win games.
Like you say, he's a young guy. You know, he's still learning the game. I guess he really teased us and got a lot of people excited about how well he was doing offensively. The bottom line with this kid is he's got all the tools to make things happen. And, you know, eventually the skill set is going to allow him to get his game back. I know that he looks a little bit, you know, down. He doesn't seem energized the same way he was. And that has to do with maybe some confidence. So he's maybe second guessing some parts of his game and is doing, you know, a little bit more hesitation instead of, you know, going for it like he was before. So he will learn. If everybody can just kind of be patient, which is a hard word to say when it comes to getting results now, but he has all the ingredients to be a really good player, and he's shown it before, and he'll show it again.
Yeah, I don't think it's really time to be concerned about Nick Suzuki. Young players have this kind of development where they're doing really well and everyone gets excited, and then there's a little bit of a lull in their game. Now, it'll be key for him to hopefully be able to pick it up and get back to that level. But at the same time, if you look around the Montreal Canadiens team recently, you know, no one's really kind of standing out at the moment, that everyone's having a hard time right now. So it's not just Nick Suzuki versus the rest of his team that are playing really well. So he's in the same boat as everyone else. And hopefully together as a team, they'll be able to get out. And then it's just a matter of finding what was working for him at the start of the season.
Yeah, he's really got to improve his faceoff. So he's down like 40%. And especially on the power play, he's taking so many power play faceoffs and losing them, and the puck goes down the ice, and there goes 20 or 30 seconds of your power play right off the bat. So he's really got to improve that aspect of his game.
Absolutely. One weird thing I noticed with Nick Suzuki's stats, I mean, 1 assist in his last 5 games, kind of interesting or coincidental. The team hasn't necessarily been playing all that well. I think Jess hit it right on the head. It's almost as if so Nick Suzuki goes, so the team goes. Maybe it's a bit too soon to say that, but I have this weird feeling that could be the case. And I'll mention this about Alexis Lafreniere before I move on to the next question here. One, I couldn't imagine if he was going through the slump that he was going through now, if he was a Montreal Canadiens player, like if the pandemic didn't happen and the team actually had a chance to get him. And also, I can think of another player who had 1 point in their first 13 or 14 games, Rick DiPietro. I don't know if that's a name you necessarily want to be associated with. Anyway, let's move on to question number 5. By the time you all will be getting this episode, the Montreal Canadiens will be on day 5 of their 6-day break in their schedule. Panelists, do you think this 6-day break will help or hurt the Montreal Canadiens?
It's an interesting one this year because usually when they have a break like this, like the bye week, and you turn off from hockey. You're not going to practice anymore. You're either getting out of town, going on a beach and forgetting, what you do for a few days, or you're with your family and you're busy with them and kind of having a normal life. But this year, that's not the case. And that's something that Tyler Toffoli spoke about yesterday as well. We have a pandemic here in Montreal. There's a curfew. So they're watching a lot of hockey, and he's kind of having FOMO in a way, seeing what other teams are doing and maybe overthinking their game and having to get back into it. So it's good because they get this practice time, which they were talking a lot about not having it because it's balancing rest and practice. But at the same time, I think mentally it's a little bit hard to not think of the current situation and the way they were playing right before the break happened.
I wouldn't be surprised if they get a slow start on Saturday against Toronto coming off such a long break. But I think in the long run, it'll help them because guys have little minor bumps and bruises. Jonathan Drouin spoke about this the other day. It gives them a week to heal those things and feel better and rest and sleep well, sleeping in your own bed, and be rested going forward. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they're slow Saturday, but they're right back at it, right? They play Saturday against Toronto and Sunday against Ottawa, 5 games in 8 days. So I think it will help them in the long run. It might hurt them though the first game they come back.
Well, one advantage, obviously, it's almost like a mini training camp number 2, when it gives them the opportunity to go over a lot of stuff, special teams. They can have their video sessions, and most importantly is getting the goaltenders the type of work that they probably need, to get their best game out there. And the other part is you've got a guy like Shea Weber, who at 35 years old, we've all seen the way he's performed when he's well rested, and I don't know what the situation is with him other than he's looked tired, whether it's mental and physical fatigue with what's happening with the team. But hopefully this time off, it's going to give him a little bit of a restart and refresh so that he can get back to the way he was playing and be his best that he can be that we've seen before.
Stu, I kind of disagree with you. I think with these days off for the Montreal Canadiens, and considering how they won that game over the weekend and they still want to find a way to return to the score sheet and score more than 2 goals a game, I have a weird feeling the Montreal Canadiens are going to go off to a pretty hot start. And considering how this Montreal Canadiens team has played over the last year and a bit, they're a team that could find a way to start off pretty well. I could see them getting a lull in the second or third, but maybe that adrenaline of not having played in so long and you're finally back on the ice and you go up against your rival in the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think they might start off pretty hot, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if they're necessarily going to start off as cold as you might think. That's just me. But Stu, I think I kind of disagree with you here.
Well, we'll see. The Leafs are going to come out because I'm sure they've had a rough week of practices after blowing that lead against the Senators. Talk about an embarrassing loss. We talked about fans of Montreal being on the Canadiens. I'm sure in Toronto, fans are on the Leafs after that game. So the Leafs are going to come out firing on Saturday night. And I just think when you go that long without playing a game, when you're in the usual routine of playing every second day, the legs, it's going to take a little while for the legs to get going with the Canadiens, but we'll see. Next week we can talk about who was right or wrong.
But
we could.
I'm quite sure that the conversation has been had of their performance versus Toronto, their first 2 periods. I mean, let's face it, they were not very good. They were sitting back, basically watching Toronto play, and I'm quite sure that they don't want to get a start like that the next game. And the message has been sent, I'm sure, that, okay, let's be ready to go right from the drop of the puck, because we can't wait and let Toronto do their damage second time around.
I'll put it this way for this game. I'll say Montreal will win that game on Saturday. I don't know if anyone else wants to throw out any predictions before we end off this week's episode. I think Montreal will win this game, and I think they'll start off pretty well.
I think I'd say the Leafs win, which is going to upset all the Canadiens fans out there, but I think it's going to take them a while to get back. I'm
going to say it's a shootout win by the Habs.
Oh, okay. What about you, Rick?
I hate to say it, but I think Toronto's going to come in and make a lot of noise against the Canadiens. So they're just they're a dangerous group, and when they want to play, oh boy, look out! Tough to shut down that big line. But yeah, I'm leaning a little bit towards Toronto. Sorry.
Maybe the first period, the last game, I mean, Matthews came in on that breakaway and fired and just missed the top corner. If that goes in, 2-0, and it's a different ball game or different hockey game going forward.
I mean,
right. Any defensive breakdown against Marner and Matthews is usually ends up in the back of the net.
They are so good in finding areas to allow them to get shots away. It's so impressive with the skill set and the speed and the way they can shoot the puck. I mean, my goodness, it's nice to watch. I'm glad I don't have to defend against them.
Well, I watched Marner there, the little tiny guy flying around. As a big defenseman, Rick, a guy like that would have driven you crazy. You want to hammer him through the boards, but you can't catch him, I guess.
No, it's a big challenge.
Okay, so myself and Jess think the Canadiens are going to win, and Rick and Stu think the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win. You watching at home, or wherever you might be watching, probably at home because we're in a pandemic, who do you think is going to win this Montreal Canadiens-Toronto Maple Leafs matchup? Please let us know in the comment section below. That's going to do it for this week's episode. If you have a question you'd like to see us tackle, please also add that to the comments and visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out past episodes and join the discussion.